Can you remember a time when you believed in video game quality? Like actually looked forward to a launch where excitement was not immediately accompanied by the tag-along thought of, well, I hope it's not broken, I hope the servers don't crash, or I hope it doesn't need too many patches post-launch. Today, every title with a sizable budget might as well be in a beta, Halo Infinite or otherwise. A monetizable core set in motion while we wait for months upon months until the full picture is worth that initial or overall investment. Truly, the 8th generation introduced the element of doubt into what it means to follow this industry, and though the first year of the 9th generation stumbles can largely be attributed to COVID, it's various core business practices allowing this stuff that need to be weeded out. I'm Scott from WhatCulture.com, and these are the 9 worst video games of 2021. Number 9. eFootball Pro Evolution Soccer 2021. Only Konami could take one of the only remotely reputable parts of their entire company, Pro Evolution Soccer, and find a way to screw it into the dirt. Enter eFootball PES 2021, a rebranding and almost soft reboot for the multi-decade-old IP that Konami would then boot out the door in a state that I'm not sure legally qualifies as a digital product. Aiming to be a free-to-play alternative to the premium, increasingly over-monetized FIFA, the glitches and bugs were immediate. Footballers, character models, and instantly memed abomination, and everything about eFootball feeling like a worthwhile platform for content to be plugged into simply didn't materialize. Konami would immediately apologize for everything I guarantee developers were screaming at them needed fixing in the first place, and eFootball has stood barely upright ever since. Number 8. Skatebird. Across the 2000s, there were a ton of Tony Hawk's clones, from the mighty aggressive inline and Matt Hoffman's BMX to the lesser-liked Simpsons skateboarding and Evolution skateboarding. With Activision's approach to remakes paying dividends across Crash, Spyro, and now Tony Hawk, it only made sense we'd see a similar resurgence of skateboarding mechanics alongside. Sadly, and it truly is just sad as this should have been so easy to get right, Skatebird, not Tiny Hawk, botches everything about its appeal, save for the character models of the birds themselves. With truly stilted physics that barely get you any air, visuals of the tricks you're pulling off here are simply not enough. The game's structure peppers a handful of empty environments with arbitrary skateboarding game goals like snagging collectibles out the sky, but nothing can shake the fact that this feels like a beta for something that might have released back in 2002. Number 7. Destruction All-Stars. Talk about a forgotten PlayStation 5 game. Destruction All-Stars was initially supposed to be one of Sony's top-tier £70 price tag titles, a showcase for their newest hardware, and a revitalized take on the Destruction Derby IP that could have maybe been something akin to a first-party Rocket League. Then whatever happened behind the scenes. The game was delayed, re-announced as a PlayStation Plus game, and we all saw the true horror of what little there was to actually play. Sadly, though it has immaculately polished character animations, everywhere else there's just zero fun to be had in Destruction All-Stars. Base gameplay centers on you ramming other cars in one of the least satisfying physics models possible, there aren't any power-ups save for a timed ultimate you can activate, and the game's story mode is straight up locked behind a paywall. Yep, this was Sony testing the waters with a monetization model that, if gameplay was outstanding, like in Halo Infinite, might have led to a similar microtransaction-based backlash. As it stands, All-Stars is instead dead in the Number 6. Apex Legends on Switch. Nintendo's little machine that could has led to some incredible feats of coding. The likes of The Witcher 3, Doom Eternal, Alien Isolation, all are genuinely impressive and hint that we maybe don't need a hardware refresh after all. Then you have the likes of Apex Legends, where despite Respawn and Panic Button being veterans in the field, this was one of those times a game just shouldn't have made the jump. Immediate game-breaking issues with a horrendously low resolution and flipbook frame rate kill this from moment one, leading to fans turning off crossplay as they were getting devoured by other platforms. Thankfully, there have been a handful of patches to address things like botched voice chat and lag across the board, but this is far from a desirable version of the game. Number 5. Dungeons & Dragons Dark Alliance. As is becoming the norm in the modern gaming industry, and stop me if you've heard this before, D&D Dark Alliance was a squad-based multiplayer loot grind action game with arenas of enemies, very little story, and a ton of repetitive gameplay. Yes, it was one of those games, as notoriously money-hungry company Wizards of the Coast took to publishing their first game, reportedly forcing this out the door before it was finished. Still, for something that at least had the backing of being a spiritual sequel to 2001's beloved and still incredible Baldur's Gate Dark Alliance, here we had precisely none of the charm or quality control. Even if you could get past how cynically designed every aspect of this was, D&D Dark Alliance was riddled with performance issues, quest blocking bugs, and moves you could spam to break the game and fly through encounters instead. The 2001 original did get a nicely touched up remaster this year on Xbox, PlayStation 5 and Switch, so please go play that instead. Number 4, BALAN Wonderworld. Square Enix are on a bit of a downswing right now. If not for Ubisoft announcing and cancelling a Ghost Recon Battle Royale and their 95% downvoted NFT project, they'd still be public enemy number 1 for screwing up the Avengers and making a Final Fantasy VII Battle Royale. BALAN Wonderworld then is another textbook example of higher-ups just not letting creatives do what's necessary to get a game out in one piece. In this case, we also have the fact that Yuji Sonic the Hedgehog creator Naka hasn't produced anything anywhere near the caliber of the Blue Blur since the character's inception, but Squeenix forcing him to turn everything around in 2 years certainly didn't help. The clash between Square Enix's want of a story-driven epic with Naka favoring a 3D platformer resulted in something where every face button does the same thing, where levels are barely finished, and where just moving your character in BALAN Wonderworld feels like an unseen god directly testing your mental fortitude. Number 3, Of Bird and Cage. Of Bird and Cage might be 2021's Ride to Hell retribution, albeit with way more horrific subject matter, some of the worst interactive sequences in gaming history, and a story that goes everywhere and nowhere at the same time. I make that comparison because it's all about the blind spot, that area between developer truly reaching for the skies with a story to tell, treating everything seriously, and the reality of animations, game mechanics, script writing, and everything else getting in the way. On the bright side, Of Bird and Cage is a well-scored interactive heavy metal opera. That is the one and only positive though, the sheer concept on paper. Everything else is where this reimagining of Beauty and the Beast, done through a gritty lens of the early 2000s when Postal 2 was turning heads, completely falls down. Of Bird and Cage is a very ugly game, inside and out. A story of abuse, toxic masculinity, and the anger that can build up inside should absolutely make for an essential, recommendable experience, but this just ain't it. Number 2, Grand Theft Auto The Trilogy Definitive Edition. Never has a dictionary definition of definitive applied less. GTA's 20th anniversary re-releases were a sad, tragic joke, a damning indictment on everything wrong with the modern day gaming space, and further confirmation that Rockstar are every bit the shell of their former selves. Yes, you can put most of the blame on hired port team Grove Street Games, but publisher Rockstar should have been watching the development of these titles like a hawk. After all, this is Grand Theft Auto and you are Rockstar. For anything less than a pristine product to come from both these entities is a shocking state of affairs to accept. A handful of patches have improved the bare bones feel to these titles, but we'll never shake the reality that this was advertised connoting GTA 5 style controls, only to feel like the bare minimum has been done before slapping on a sizable price tag and calling it a day. And number 1, Battlefield 2042. For the longest time, I was ready to crown the GTA Definitive Editions the absolute worst titles of the year. Then you get to really analysing just how much is rotten with the core of Battlefield 2042 versus the reality of what GTA's releases are after a handful of fixes. For the latter, we have something that's underwhelming as hell when it comes to modernizing 20-year-old games in any meaningful way, but they do play solid enough. And after some sizable patches, graphics have been improved with draw distance receiving a much-needed re-injection of atmospheric fog. For Battlefield though, it's an ongoing tire fire still ablaze as I record this, showing no signs of cooling down. From the lack of a scoreboard to even track how you're doing to the superhero shooter chasing setup of favoring specialists over team tactics. It only gets worse from there as to who this is even for. The cringe-inducing post-game celebrations, paltry amount of weapons, vehicle imbalance, removal of things like crouch sprinting and squad mechanics, the list goes on and on. Though DICE have attempted to patch in a handful of tweaks, the fact EA are steamrolling ahead with multiple new Battlefield releases anyway shows they'd rather wash their hands of this long term and just try again. And those are my picks for the worst video games of 2021. Let me know your own not favorites down in the comments below, and please subscribe to the WhatCulture Gaming Podcast. For now, I've been Scott from WhatCulture.com, and I'll catch you soon.